Well, the second season of Rings of Power came to a close. And I guess just the most basic of comparisons between this and the first season, second season was a little better. Not by much. There was a whole lot of stupid in it. Primarily was there wasn't a whole lot of worship of Galadriel. There was actually a lot of criticism of her having been, bamboozled by Sauron and all that stuff. But still, eventually, you're going to get her, Wonder Woman, Xena Warrior Princess routine, and you got some of that in there. And then they had to have a moment for the other elves to look at her and go, wow, she's amazing, that kind of thing. So kind of ruined the one improvement they'd made, The stranger, he's Gandalf, all right? You know what? Some were beginning to think, oh, maybe it would be a twist, and he's actually a Saruman, but his storyline was just annoying and boring. He meets Tom Bombadil, and for what it is, it does make a certain amount of sense that Bombadil would be the type of, spirit guide or what have you, just sort of nudging Gandalf in the right direction for what he needed to do and all that stuff. So by the end, he finds his stick and he realizes his name because the other, well, they're not, of course, they're not hobbits. You had the hard farts or whatever they're called. And then there was this other offshoot of them living in the desert, but in this underground, anyway, hidden little village within the rocks or whatever. And, it gets destroyed by the Dark Wizard and all that, so they got to move on. But they're all grateful to Gandalf for helping them out. And so as they're leaving, they start calling him Grand Elf. That's right. Because they thought he was an elf. But, of course, he wasn't. But nevertheless, that's why they called him Grand Elf. And after a while, it takes a while, but it clicks. And he's like, oh, my name's Gandalf. And after he's found his stick, and then Bombadil's like, yep. So there you go. He knows who he is and all that stuff. So anyway, but one of the things that happens is that they just keep ripping off scenes from the actual Lord of the Rings, and especially from the movies. So the Dark Elf and Grand Elf have their confrontation. And the dialogue is very similar to Saruman and Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. So, that's just... Now, granted, there's mirrors and echoes in storytelling and stuff, but this is just really sloppy, kind of like Star Wars sequel trilogy sloppy. And all it is just a ripoff because they don't know how to write dialogue for the level of a Tolkien narrative. So that's where they are. Meanwhile, of course, and for the dwarves, the king, he's dominated by the Ring of Power, and he digs until he opens up the Balrog's prison, I guess, or what have you, and there it is. But it looks exactly like the monster, the Balrog from the movies, and I guess they had to pay a pretty penny to license that version because Warner Brothers would own that likeness of it. But it's the exact same creature with the flaming whip and everything. And then there you go. It's kind of the same thing. The king doesn't make it, And he has a touching send-off to his son, who he deems is now the king of the dwarves and all that, as he goes to his demise. And it's just the scene of Gandalf versus the Balrog. Same thing, I don't think the king will be coming back, but, I don't know, maybe they'll steal that too. But, so that's where they leave that. And meanwhile, the elves are all defeated by the orc army. But the dwarves show up at the last minute to rout them and run off the orcs, but the damage is done. The city's destroyed, and the elves have got to move somewhere else. And so they cobble together who they can, and off they go. Meanwhile, Adar meets his end. The orcs, they meet Sauron, and the next thing you know, they're turned immediately because, you see, despite Rings of Power depicting them as just another group of people, they have families, they have worries, they're kind of, why do we need to keep fighting wars? Why can't we just make a place for ourselves in Mordor and all that? No, that's not how they are. And as soon as a new master steps in, they're like, yep, well, get rid of the old boss. And that's what they do. They butcher him to death, and he's like really stunned that this happened. But he did put on the Ring of Power, but he easily gives it up to Galadriel. That's another thing. It's like, well, I don't. But anyway, and Galadriel seems stunned that this happens, and then Sauron appears, and she says, "Oh, I guess you planned this whole thing." Now, in the scene, she's acting like she just now realized this, but no, she had already figured that this was a manipulation by Sauron, which it was, for Adar to take the army, to take the city and attack and all that. And this was a means by which Sauron would seize control of the orcs, which he has. And, but no, she's stunned and all this stuff. Well, whatever. So now they take a page out of the Raylo book of, Kylo Ren and Rey. So Galadriel and Sauron, who, of course, well-known romantic interests. There was never anything like that. But, oh, boy, she was really smitten with Sauron, and Sauron with her, and I would make you the queen of Middle-earth and all this stuff. So they fight and fight and fight. And ultimately, he stabs her with his crown, and he's demanding of her to hand over the rings. But instead of giving him the ring, all of them, that she drops off the cliff. And then, oh boy, that's it for Galadriel, because this is a really long fall. And the other elves come to her, and turns out the fall didn't do anything. She's perfectly fine from the fall, but the stabbing wound is bad because it's a magic one, and the darkness is spreading in the wound. And the king tries to heal her, and he can't. But then Elrond shows up, and he's got a super ring too now, so he's able to save her. And there you go, everything's fine. And then they just say, well, what do we do? Do we, batten down and put up a good defense? Or do we attack? So they decide they're going to attack. So there you go. That's how that works out. Yeah. But at least, is it one of the episodes, the big battle episode, when it came to an end, they pulled a willow and played some heavy metal song. At the end for the credits, like a Lord of the Rings show with heavy metal. Yeah. So that was pretty awful. For the most part, probably the best episode was the battle, because it was mostly just a battle, so they didn't have enough room to kind of mess that up, but still had some stupid in it. There was this one thing when they made a big deal, all of a sudden, this elf archer, and I guess she's the greatest archer they've ever had, and all this other thing. There's this big build-up for her to take this significant shot that Elrond needed her to do, and so she's going to do it, but then suddenly the orcs just shower her with arrows, and she's got all kind of arrows in her back, and I think she pulls one of the arrows out of her back and uses it. Anyway, and it manages to get off the shot before she dies. And it's this whole big scene about her. Never met her before. Know nothing about her. If you were going to do a scene like that, you should have developed this character. At least maybe at the opening of the episode. But no, she's just thrown in, shoots and it really, the other elves were watching her die, and they're like, oh my God. But Elrond's like, well, that's a wrap on her. Let's go. I don't know. Did none of them think of this? So Oh yeah, Elrond and Galadriel make out too. But of course, that was him passing a means for her to escape when she was captured by Adar at one point. Yeah, yeah. But we all know Sauron was the one who really floats her boat. Because, well, that's lore, isn't it? So, there you go. Poor what's-his-face, Killerman, but I can't say his name. The Smith. He figures it all out way too late, and then Sauron has him shackled. So he has to cut his thumb off to try to escape that. Just gets recaptured, gets tortured, and then Sauron gets mad and kills him. Yeah. Needed him to keep, tell him where the rings are and all that. But he's the one who declares that Sauron is the Lord of the Rings and that he will forever be imprisoned by them. And Sauron's like, really? Yeah, really. You end up being nothing but an eye and then some hobbits kill you. What? Yeah. No. Yeah. Anyway, there you go. Second season of that. And I think they wanted to do 5 seasons. I don't think so. Yeah. Oh, and when it comes to House of the Dragon versus Rings of Power, House of the Dragon wins. Even though their second season fizzled. Boy, did it. And they ran out of money and it became all this filler type stuff towards the end. But their battle episode was way more spectacular than the Rings of Power one. I mean, you had a dragon duel, So, yeah, it's incredible. This is another one of those that really is on par with what happened to Star Wars. The amount of money spent to seize that franchise and then just burn it all down. It's an incredible thing to see. Here, they don't really own the whole property of Lord of the Rings and all that, but they spent an enormous amount of money just to buy the title and access to some of the characters and all that. And this is what they come up with. So, first season was way worse than this one. There is that. But but the second season is just, there's no saving this. So, there you go. Hey, is it worth a shot just out of curiosity to check it out? No. So, that's it.